I'm Rachel Branch, and it's a real pleasure to welcome Mr. Casey Pease. And we are going to talk about regionalization on this program. Casey Pease is the Constituent Service Director for the Office of State Senator Paul Mark. And he is also and chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals and member of the Planning Board for the town of Savoy. So you're keeping very busy. Welcome, Casey.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Appreciate it.
It's wonderful. And as I start off each program, I always ask our guests, would you please share with our audience whatever you would like about your heritage, your background, your experience, or whatever you choose.
My heritage. Well, I'm an Irish English boy. I grew up in Worthington, which is on the Hampshire-Berkshire County line. Moved to Savoy a few years ago, so one small town to another. 26 years old, and I've been serving as Constituent Service Director for Mark, and kind of helping with all things district related with the office, particularly in Berkshire County, and the other 57 cities and towns that make up our very large district. But I've always been involved with the community. When I was going to school and Gateway Regional in Huntington, and I've worked on presidential campaigns, I've managed political campaigns, I ran for office when I was 21, and now of course serving for the senator and in what capacities I can for the town. So just very, very involved with public service.
And I think you and I both share that, how important it is, public service.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, do you think you'll run for office again? Maybe?
We'll see how the world goes. I always tell people, because my mother asked me this question, I'm like, the way I look at it is the way that makes the most sense in my life to serve people. And if that means running one day, I may do that. If it means working behind the scenes or whatever, then I'll do that. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
One of the things I believe is you don't have to be elected to be effective.
100%.
You can be effective in all kinds of ways.
Completely agree.
Now, I don't know if you want to segue into a little bit about what you do in Senator Mark's office, but I understand that you've completed a project, ongoing legislative research project on shared services and regionalization, which is the topic of our program. And we decided that was going to be the topic we talked about today.
Yeah.
What did you learn from your project, and why did it become so important to you?
Yeah, well, first I'll say it's not finished yet. I'm in my 8 or 9 months working on it, and I feel like the more in depth I get into it, the more work that needs to be done. But it is an ongoing project that our office is conducting, and it kind of just stemmed, when I started in the office back in January when Senator Mark was inaugurated, there were a number of issues that kind of came to the forefront, and one that we've seen through the number of towns that we represent is the issue regarding shared services and regionalization. Having come from a small town, living in a small town, it's something that I'm pretty acutely aware of. And, we decided that this would be a project that I would kind of go more in depth in with the perspective of how can the state, how can the Commonwealth better serve our municipalities, and really look at areas where we can incentivize or work to help our communities to share their services, to regionalize in many different ways, in ways that make sense. So that's kind of how it started, and it's just been an 8 months of doing all kinds of different interviews, collecting data, doing research into what services can be shared, what would that process look like, what is the best way to do it. And we've used a bunch of different organizations, governments that we've interviewed with, FRCOG, Franklin Regional Council of Governments, Barnstable County, which has one of the last county governments in the state of Massachusetts.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we have 14 counties, and I think most of them were dissolved, at least their county governments were dissolved in the 80s and 90s, but Barnstable County does still have a county government. So.
And we still have county.
Well, we still have the counties.
Officials in some areas.
And we have sheriffs.
Yeah,
we still hold the sheriffs, right?
Yeah.
Their purview is mostly around the jails. But we don't have, at least Berkshire County, Hampshire, Franklin, Hamden counties, there's no official form or government entity that serves the county at large.
Do you know historically why counties were
Dissolved?
dissolved, and
Yeah.
what was the thinking? And would you believe that we ought to go back to some county form of government
So this is
as we have a declining
Right.
population and other loss of tax base?
Right. No, so this is a great question. From my research, most of the counties were dissolved in the 80s and 90s. In the 80s, when Governor Weld was governor, we had the financial crisis. There was a lot of nepotism, right? There was a lot of folks that were getting appointed to these positions within the county because they were friends with politicians, and they weren't really serving in an effective way, in all their communities that the county government served. They just weren't that effective. And so, over the process of a couple decades, they were dissolving with the idea that municipalities would be able to sort of handle the services locally, and then the state would kind of fill in the rest, right, or vice versa. And Barnstable County in particular, they felt that being on the Cape, it was important to have a regional form of government that continued to serve. And so they created their charter, or re-upped their charter in 1988, I believe, and they fought really hard to preserve their county government.
Which must have been kind of necessary with the layout of how Cape Cod
right, and there's so
geographically
many,
is.
exactly, and there's so many services, being on the ocean, being all coastal communities, that they felt a county form of government would serve them. And so, to your question, does it make sense to go back to it? I think that there needs to be, and there is great benefit to, a regional entity, be it formally county government, be it by giving more resources to our regional planning commissions, or by encouraging a council of governments, which is kind of similar to county government, but it's what Franklin Regional Council of Government for Franklin County. They dissolved their county government, and then they formed a council of governments. Hampshire County did the same, although the council did dissolve, unfortunately. But I think the answer
What
to
are the differences between a council of government and a region?
Yeah.
Is it a legal definitions?
Yeah, so council of governments is really the towns. Each town sort of opts into this organization, but it's not formalized like a county government would be. It doesn't have a direct tax base like a county government could do. So it's like the benefits of having county government without the actual layer of government that would be required officially and per the Constitution.
Okay.
And so each town, if we were to go back to a county form of government, each community within that county would have to vote. There would be a formal process. But if there was a council of governments, while still there would have to be a process for the towns to vote to be a part of it, I think it would give a little bit less of a bureaucracy and government kind of layer that towns might not wish to go back to, right? It's hard to make the argument that we need more government, but I think, again, when you look at the declining population, declining enrollment in our schools, the time it takes now for small town government to function day to day, applying for grants, towns that need a town administrator, the police departments. There's more requirements now from the state as to what services municipalities are required to provide. And when you look at a town like Savoy of 600 people, we don't have the ability to hire all these people. We don't have the money to provide all these services in an effective way. So if we're able to share services with neighboring communities, or if we had a county or regional structure that could help, provide some of these services, that would, benefit our communities greatly. And I think, we're at a point now where we're sort of in a crisis of government for some of our small towns.
Yeah.
And, it crosses so many different services, And when you look at the next 5, 10 years from now, it's really concerning about how our town's going to continue to survive and provide for their residents. So this, to me, it makes sense to go to some kind of regional structure, and the project's looking at, how do we do that? What would that look like? And then from the state, what can we incentivize? How as a state government can we incentivize communities to do this as opposed to, mandating, requiring them, forcing them to do something like that? So
Yes, and that's the hard part, is bringing people in, and that's education.
it is.
It's bringing people in to
No,
learn as life changes all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And of course, even you're talking about environmental effects, what I call
Yeah, and
climate
like,
catastrophe, all the
right.
thing that are happening right now.
Right,
and,
right.
And we've seen so much of it, even in the United States. So this is also preparation. What were the pros as you were doing your project, as you were creating and working on this project? Additional pros that
Yeah, well, to your point, right, we have the climate crisis. We have a crisis of ambulance services more locally. That's been the conversation that's been going on. We have, you name it, and there are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. It doesn't make sense that 351 cities and towns should have to sort of fend for themselves, right? Like, we need to be working on these issues in a more collaborative and regional manner. So, it's just some of the pros. If you look at Barnstable County and the services they provide, for example, they have the ability to hire full-time grant writers so they can bring in money from the federal and state government for the towns. So, towns like Savoy, for example, or Cheshire, they may not have the expertise or have somebody who's working to be able to apply for these grants. So that's one example. IT services. Nowadays more and more
Really
things are online. Small towns, municipalities, we have to, you have websites and other IT concerns, and there's security concerns that come with that. Towns can't afford to hire their own IT people, so if you have, a regional IT person that can help communities, that's another example.
And major in that is ransoms and hacking.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
that's
happens.
just, so you've got a security issue, an IT issue, and a security issue right
Right.
there.
So that's an example.
So regional police.
And policing, right? Like, so this is, and I'm saying this personally, like, it makes no sense for some of our small towns to be required to have and be held to the standard of a full-time police department like Worcester or Boston. It's just unreasonable. You have some towns that are moving to share police departments, the towns of Blandford and Chester and Hampden County that have done so. Montgomery, looking over into Hampshire County, and I forget who they have been merging with, but it's just not a feasible situation, and I think we can share municipal police departments. Maybe there down the road is an opportunity to go back to, with our county sheriffs, having, county sheriffs perform some of the law enforcement requirements.
Integrate the two.
Yeah, again, it's figuring out how can we make government smarter and more effective. And there are too many issues going on, and it seems like, in the Senate office, we hear more and more every day from our smaller towns in particular, like, there are a lot of issues where collaboration could happen better if we did more regionalization. Now, that's not with everything. When you talk about schools in particular, that's an area where, regionalization isn't always the answer for everything.
If you're talking about administration,
well,
but also you do have regional school districts.
We do,
work.
and they certainly can work, and I think the state wants to see more regionalization, but we have to understand, what makes the most sense for students, what that makes the most sense for towns, and
Absolutely.
when you look at schools in particular, I think that has to be done on a case-by-case basis. But again, like, this project is about figuring out, identifying the issues, identifying the successes where services are being shared in different places in the Commonwealth and different places in the country. Looking at examples in Colorado and other states that have done well, and figuring out from an incentive point of view, like when it comes to the state, the legislature, what bill or legislation could we put together that would help towns, and just figuring out that path.
Well, a little bit, we were talking before, obviously the question I have is about autonomy for local communities, and we ought to talk about that for a minute, because that brings up all kinds of problems of people that won't consider this because they're afraid of a loss of the power structure, or whatever you want to call it, and those are real issues that could be a roadblock for the need to. It sounds like from what you're saying, this is a real need, regionalization.
It's an incredible need, and to your point, that is really an issue of concern, right? An issue where residents and smaller town officials, have concern about local control. We don't want to cede our power or our authority to another, agency or to the state necessarily. Like, we want to be able to have our autonomy, and I think that's important, and part of the conversation that needs to be had moving forward when we come up with what ideas or solutions we have is how can we keep that peace. And I think the reality is, our identity as towns come from our community, and we can make government work better while also keeping that autonomy, while also keeping that each flavor, each identity of a community. It's all about working together. I don't want people to think that by regionalizing, it means we're ceding something, it means that we're getting rid of an identity. No, it's an opportunity to work, I think, even better.
Strengthen your identity.
And strengthen it, really.
I'm a strong believer in consensus.
Yeah.
I think that working with each community, you have to find consensus to make it.
Yeah.
As if you've got 2 or 3 or 4 more towns or cities that could be part of this, that you would want to have the strongest consensus you could have. I'm not talking about compromise. I'm talking about consensus. There's a whole difference in the value and meaning of consensus and working together and collaboration and commitment, community commitments.
Yeah, and the reality, I think, when you look at Western Massachusetts, for example, like we have population decline. We, while have the vast majority of the land mass, we don't have the population, and we have to kind of, just like we always have, and stubborn New Englanders, but we have to work together. We have to figure out the best ways to work together, to work collaboratively, and to do what's best for our towns. And this is exactly what that process is about. And I personally, as someone who's grown up here, who has lived in small towns my entire life, really appreciate the opportunity to kind of be at the forefront with this, or not necessarily forefront, but be working on this project, because I think it's also being proactive. If we can identify these things early on, that way we're not reacting down the road, and then here the state's going to come in and do something that maybe communities might not want to see, right? It's really about figuring this out so that we can have these conversations now to figure out what the best solutions will be in the future. So,
well, I think I'm delighted that you become a guest on Solutions Rising, because this is hopefully a way for you to start presenting this to the community, and we're aired throughout the Commonwealth, and I feel quite sure this won't be our first program.
Yeah.
But have you hit any roadblocks? And obviously you're passionate about regionalization, and probably more so as you dug in and found out what that really meant.
Yeah, I would say it's I haven't had any roadblocks yet. It is still just a research project. I think I'd like to get to a point soon where I can have a presentation to our office writ large, and also to maybe other offices in the legislature to see maybe. Personally, I think it would be worth investing some resources into creating a task force, or putting a little bit more time and energy on this topic, to be able to identify what some of those roadblocks might be. It's too early to say. I do anticipate that whatever, again, there's a tendency, I think, for people to get a little nervous when they hear the word regionalization, and the roadblock will definitely be in the future kind of the education and outreach piece to our communities, and in ensuring that there is involvement in this process. Again, whatever ideas that we come up with as potential solutions, just really making sure that communities feel like they're a part of that process, that it's not, again, just coming down from the state mandating or what have you, that it's really a collective process.
Have you thought about having a kind of like a comment period, but not a survey of yes, no, an essay type comment period, and putting that forth across the Commonwealth, or actually starting off in Senator Mark's district, to ask people how they feel about it, what they would like to see include in a regionalization plan, how they think it would affect their communities, and actually say, would you have, what would your problems with this be?
Concerns,
and that's a
questions,
data collector.
Yeah, no, I think we'll definitely get to that point. You know, like I said, the next step is really kind of finalizing, getting to a point where we kind of have a list of solutions from this research project. You know, getting to a point where maybe there is a task force where we can have more open community conversations. You know, right now it's just been kind of me interviewing town officials and local officials and different agencies and community members, but I think that time will come, and I think it's important. And this is a great step because I think people need to start thinking about this. And you know, if they already have questions, kind of reaching out and asking them and thinking of them now for sure. But no, that process will definitely come, and I think that you'll see that this is probably going to grow into something a little bit bigger than what it may be right now as sort of a special project that we're leading in our office. I'm really hoping to make the case to the legislature that this is something really worth putting more resources into to help come up with some solutions.
It sounds like it's a necessity.
Yeah, well, it
arriving and facing us.
It's such a necessity because it's like, you know, Senator Mark, you know, will host these town hall series, and you know, and within my job, I meet with so many different folks, and you know, get presented with so many different issues, and I can't tell you the number of times it makes me like think back to the project, like, well, you know, this is something that I'm, you know, that's important to, or that is valuable to consider in this project, and it, as you can see, something I'm very passionate about, and the more I get involved with it, the more I realize that this is something that I think needs even more time and consideration from the state.
How far along are you in your project? Are you 50, 60, 80,
I would
90%
yeah, right,
completed?
Right.
Or,
no, so
or is it fluid?
I would say that within the next 2 months or so, that I'm going to have a pretty good presentation to put together in-house to then maybe hopefully present to other offices, representative offices, Senate offices, and hopefully from there we'll have a better idea of the direction. If other offices are interested in being involved, again, it's maybe creating a task force. But it's important that with this project, it's getting that list of what are the solutions, what are the tangible things that the state can do to encourage, you know, municipalities to be a part of it and be involved with this process. So I would say we're about 80% there to the first part, completing this initial project, and then, you know, hopefully making a determination from that what to do going forward. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you'll do one of your presentations right here on Solutions Rising.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we're getting near the end. We only have a few more minutes. Do you have some final thoughts, or any encouragements for individuals in our viewing audience and listening audience, because we do carry out a few radio stations?
Yeah.
Any thoughts about contributions?
I will say, you know, we're living through a very dark time, I think, looking at the world and just everything that's been going on. And I will say, as someone who's 26-year-old, who's involved with our state government, involved in local government, I will say that with this project and looking at tangible solutions, it gives me a lot of hope for the future. I think that, you know, there's a lot of goodness in this world. There are a lot of people that want our government, that want our society to do better, and it can do better. And, you know, while that's sort of, I know, a passionate kind of statement, that's how I feel.
It's a
But it's important, and that's, again, like, this project to me is about that. It's one step in the right direction. And so, you know, my final thoughts are, you know, there's a lot of work for us to do, but we can do it. We can get through these times, and we will come out better and stronger for it, as long as we believe in each other, and as long as we believe in ourselves and continue to respect each other and figure out just kind of how to navigate this crazy world. So
and share the solutions.
Share the solutions.
That's what I say, one to one together.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And as I've said so many times, each one of us has a gift. Nobody has to tell you how to use your gifts. You know how to use your gifts. And then we share them.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I must thank you. I am so grateful that you have agreed to be a guest on Solutions Rising, and I expect you again.
Yeah, thank you. I know I really, Rachel, we've talked, you know, known each other for many years.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, we have lots more to discuss and,
You bet.
and a lot of issues to talk about, of course. So I appreciate it.
This is an open invitation.
Yeah.
And if each one of us picked up one problem and solved it, imagine the incredible view we would all have of Solutions Rising. Please be part of the solution. And thank you, Casey Pease, for being a guest on Solutions Rising, and I look forward to your being with us again.
Thank you.